Uh-oh.
All right, so we're back where we had left off. Last time was wiring up the power transformer, the primary side, the jack, or rather, excuse me, the IEC inlet, the switches, indicator lamp, or switch, on-off switch, indicator lamp, thus forth and so on. So while I was doing that, I noticed that this particular fuse holder was missing something, the tab. So that kind of sucks. So I'm putting these fuse holders on the POS list. Right? We're not going to bother getting those again. So now we got to replace them with like a standard full-size fuse holder, which I've always used anyway. And we're going to replace both of them because we obviously don't want to have a tech go, well, one's a small fuse and one's a big fuse. That's goofy. So we're not doing that. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace this fuse holder with the same type, right? So I'm just pulling out some of the work that we had done. Right? It's a shame, but this is what happens on occasion. Something, but it was, it's worth a try to see how these fuse holders were going to work out. Obviously not well, so they're done. So we will just trash them. Tell you though too, the plastics situation is not good. Everything that we seem to have plastics wise these days is becoming worse and worse and worse. All right, so like things like fuse holders, knobs, jacks, everything just seems to be getting crappier. All right. So we got to line that up so it doesn't interfere with anything. Go ahead and use our ESPN tool to put it home. I'm going to bend this particular tab up a tiny bit so I can get to it. I'm going to bend this tab out a little bit so I can get the leads through for the center tap and choke once again. But being that one broke, I can't take a chance on the other one. All right? On it failing. Because that's not what this is about, right? This is about building an amp for touring. Right? We can't have failure. And if we've seen failure and we continue and say, it probably won't happen again, then we're asking for it. All right? We're not going to have something work. And then it is our fault. Okay, so that particular fuse holder is replaced. Now I'm going to go replace the other one. Now I don't remember where I left off on the last video, but I believe, talking about safety a little bit of your IEC connections, right? So I'm just going to go through it again one more time because this is, important. If I can relay anything that's of importance, this is the kind of stuff that would be valuable, in my humble opinion. So, all right. So you have these connections on your IEC outlet, right? You have a neutral, a ground, and a live. First, you have to be damn sure you know which is the neutral on the plug and which is the neutral connection on your power transformer, and get them right. Because if you're going to fuse the neutral and have your 120 volt unfused, that's bad. I could say that right off the bat. So make sure that your neutral is not the one that you're fusing. Okay? The next thing would be the ground. All right? So when this fuse holder broke, I don't know if that part of the video, which is now trash, had this in it because I have this lead already sort of attached, but I'm going to go over it again. So this ground wire is the most important wire in the whole thing. All right, every other wire is secondary to this wire. And what you want is to make sure that you don't nick the wire when you're stripping it, because then it could break, and that your solder joints are very good. That's the second thing. The third thing, and maybe the most important thing, is this. You want to make this wire longer than your hot 120 volt wire is to the fuse holder. The reason being, if this receptacle were ever to pull free from the chassis, if it were to break anything, any lead, have a chance to break any lead in here, it would break the high volt lead before it could break the ground lead, right? And if you're going to use a hardwired cord that's just going through a grommet and there's no detachable receptacle here, then you better make damn sure that's what you did, because without that, you're just asking for trouble. I mean, seriously, you're asking for a lot of trouble. I will put you in trouble. As if something we were talking about, if that should ever pull free and that ground should break and the high volt is still, the 120 is still connected, you now have a live chassis potentially, right? And then you have your guitar player with a cord that's attached to a live chassis. Now most guys are on wirelesses these days, so it don't matter too much, but don't do it. It's bad. Okay? There we go. That's our public service announcement. So here we go. And then this is going to go back up to the switch, right? So we're wiring up the switch. So we have our neutrals done to our lamp. We have our grounds nice and long. And now we're doing our 120 volt fused connection to the power switch. And I think I was saying something too about making this joint here. I don't like to use the word flimsy, but flimsier than your ground connection. So should there be a disaster, it can break free. All right, because if the amplifier is flying through the air, or it's going to get ripped, the cord's going to get ripped, or something bad's going to happen, it's pretty much the amp is screwed anyway. So I wouldn't worry about breaking a wire inside. Make sure it breaks this wire. Then the whole thing just goes into paperweight mode and nobody gets hurt, which is a good thing. All right, so where were we? All right, so this red here, I believe, is our 120 for the power. All right, and then we had the green and the white were the bias. All right, so that can go that way. And then these two are just to be basically not used. So I'm going to crimp them off, right? And I'm going to take some of our astrotite and I'm going to cut me a couple of sections of astrotite to just kind of insulate these unused 120, or rather, excuse me, 230 volt and 240 volt primary wires for our European friends. Right? If we were making this for our European friends, we would use one of those. So I'm grabbing the heat gun. You can go ahead and just and I've kind of made them longer than they need to be, right, hanging off the edge past where the wire actually ends. And then while it's still hot and gooey, I'm just going to squish it and burn myself. But if you don't like getting burned, don't be an addict. Okay, so now all of these are ready to start being bundled, right, with our, let me get this stuff out of the way, with our wire ties. All right, so I got my bag of wire ties. Gonna break out a few more, leave them here, and start a wrapping. All right, so we'll bring this around like that, and around like that, and we'll just start right here, getting that neat. All right, find the way they like to get together and put them together that way. Okay, where'd I put my wire cutters? Amp. So clip these away. Right now these are going to make a turn. Right, the white, the green, and the red are going to make a turn. I think one more. Maybe one more? I don't know. Where they're going to meet up with the blue. So maybe just one more tie here. That's good. Now they'll make a turn. So the rest of these will continue. All right. Okay. That's good. I'm just going to continue down this side here. And I'm going to try to get a couple of ties on the heat shrink to make sure that that stays in place. All right, that's covering the unused primaries, 230 and 240 volt. So I'm going to probably, oh, I forgot to put this one in there. Backtrack. This is going to happen when you do this. Is you kind of got to be thinking like 5 steps ahead of where you are at all times to plan out your lead dress, right? But if we were doing the Marshall wrap style that I was describing sort of how to do earlier, it would be a lot more painful because that's a lot of work that you just kind of would have to backtrack on. And you might not be able to do it. In some instances, you can't go back. You would have to undo everything. All right, so see, I'm leaving this with lots of lead. I don't want it to really be, you know, too secured. I want it to be able to, in a sense, pull last, right? So it has to be the longest wire, longer than the high volts, than the 120, than the hot. Yeah, we're gonna run this. So pull this one off. That looks good right there. Once again, making sure that there's some securing of the astrotype, even though that stuff doesn't really ever want to go anywhere once it's on. All right, so there's all the leads that are going to make the turn. All right, so we have our hot from the fuse, our hot for the transformer, and then our 2 bias and ground. Now, some people would ground this here. I like to ground it at the capacitor. That's just me. I always think that nodes should be grounded at their capacitors, right? So like the rectifier, the capacitor right there, that's where I would ground, you know, my my rectifier, right? That's where I would ground the negative side of the rectifier of the full wave bridge. So being that there's a bias supply that has capacitors, a diode, dropping resistor, and it's grounded like here on the bus cable that runs on the back of the pots, that's where I would want to ground this to. Kind of keep them in pairs. Right, and grounding can be God knows what, right? You could spend an eternity thinking about oops, I missed the blue wire. You can spend an eternity thinking about grounding. And there's no perfect solution to any of it. Right? And that's half of what this is deciding what you're willing to deal with and what you're willing to get in trade. What you're not willing to deal with and what you get as a result of that. And then making the decision which way you think is better. Convention is always safe though, right? Because it's tested. I'm sort of going off of my experience of having built enough of these, of all different kinds of amps and designed amps and done all that kind of stuff, that I know what has worked for me, so I will continue down that path. And yes, not to be goofy or whatever, but I am doing this by memory. I don't have any schematics around or anything. I'm just doing it by memory. All right, so maybe go one more. Yeah, let's give it one more, and then we'll connect to the switch. So if I do make a mistake, or if I change something, forgive me, because I am doing it from the memories. All right, so this is, that's the transformer side because it's got the mushy wire. All right, there we go. And this over here is from the fuse. So I'm going to put this one in here. You know, I'm going to splay them just a little bit, just to give myself a little more room to work. Soldered it on. And also too, sometimes I forget what I'm building. So like I'd forgotten that this is not just like a normal super lead, right? That this is a Jose. So I added this switch over here. I don't know if you can see it. I'll move this over off camera, which is the jump switch, right? And I'd forgotten that we were going to do the jump switch because it's a Jose, and the Jose's have a jump switch, so this will too. Yeah. There we go. And then these shall continue on. Oh, I forgot to put this guy in. Oh, bad Teddy. Right, so this will get clamped along with all this stuff. Right? Not a big deal. Just the indicator lamp. Come on, turn around. There we go. There we go. We're just going to tack this one on to the side there. Make a little room. There we go. So that is complete. Okay, so I think let's just give it a quick look. Clean up a little bit of this. Make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. All right, we do have to run the lead now from, I forgot what we were doing, the output switch in episode God knows what. We have to run the lead here. So let's see what we got. And we got this piece of white wire left that we can use. What gauge is this? Trying to read it here. Unfortunately, this piece does not have any gauge on it, so we'll use some known 20. So we don't want to cheap out on the output wire. Make it too small. That would be bad, right? Or less than optimum. So I'm going to put these through like that, right? And this runs to the switch. It also, on the Jose, the feedback tap follows the selector switch, right? Some do, some amplifiers like early Marshalls do not, right? Like you would solder the feedback onto a tap. The Jose, like a lot of the later Marshalls, just followed whatever tap the output selector was set to. And that will have an effect, obviously, on the feel of the amp, as well, that a 4 ohm versus a 16 ohm, right? So there we have that. Good to go. All right, so let's just look at everything again. What have we got here? All right, so there we have our rectifier anode, the ground, our 2 high volt leads. We have our bias supplies. Okay, so we can continue doing the bondage thing on the bias supply a little bit here. And then, how are we doing on time? We're on 24 minutes. And it's getting late in the day, too. So I've sort of been going and just filming as I go and breaking this stuff out into chunks as the days progress. So by the time you see the last one of these, the amplifier probably is not here anymore. All right? But I can tell you right now, I don't know who's going to win the World Series because they've only played 2 games. But I'm guessing it's going to be the Astros. Although I'd prefer the Phillies, maybe. Okay. Not to start a war there. Let's see where we're at. Alright, so this all looks good. This is all correct. We got over there. Capacitor over there. We can do these here, right? So this is for your preamp, right? For the cathode follower and for your input stages, right? The surrogate Jose stage as well as what would be the normal first stage for both bright and normal input. So we could just go ahead and do a little grounding, right? I think I got a little piece of wire here that we can use. Alright, we're just going to use some bare wire. Crimp it over. Am I in? No, I'm not in frame. Move over. Okay. Now we're in frame. So we're going to insert, crimp it. Right. Now solder it in place. And then we'll make the turn to go through our solder tab. Right, and then we'll fold it back and fold it over. Get ourselves a nice, good, secure ground here. There we go. Solder it down. There we go. Get that little extra piece out of there. This little piece of fuzz there. Okay. So then these we're going to extend just a couple leads off of that will meet up with our board, right? So here we have the preamp board. Let me get it turned around right. So right here would be where the capacitor would meet, right? With the board would be one right here and one right here, right? On opposite sides of this 10K. So underneath we're going to solder through these turrets, right? So I'm going to lay this in place just to get an idea of how long I'm going to need these particular wires to be. So I'm going to grab some more of my red wire and I'm going to attach to the can. Right? That's good. And let's see where the 10Ks were. Okay, right here's one. Get this out of the way. So right about there, we need to cut it. And then this one, yeah, that was just enough wire. Looks like. What are we doing on time? 28 minutes. Like I said, I'm trying to keep these things around a half an hour at a time so they don't go on for weeks. Although you're seeing, I think you're seeing pretty much everything here, right? Unedited and just going. Wiring along. Okay. Let's look at this. This one's going to go to like right there. So we'll cut, we'll say about this long. All right. So that's that. Now the choke is going to, this is the opposite side of our choke, right, which is just a big coil anyway. So you can argue about whether there's a whether it matters which is which. Kind of does. Everything matters, right? So I'm just going to do a little wire in there just to hold it in place. And it's going to come to about here. Right? Okay, so that's good. Now I could just bend, right, and come out here somewhere. So that's good. So that stays up, that stays up, that stays up, that stays up. All right, so I think at this point is actually we're right on 30. So this is a really good time to stop and just evaluate our lives. Have we been wasting them? And see what we can do here. All right, so when next we meet, I believe that I will be testing my work here. I'll put some fuses in, and I'll make sure that we're getting appropriate voltages where we need them. And then we're going to put in the potentiometers, drop in the board, and start wiring up the preamp, right? So that should be a lot of fun then. So once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. And we'll get this thing finished, and we'll test it. We'll have some fun with it. Then we'll send it out to Vic, and he can play it with Mike, Sammy. That's kind of funny, right? And see how it sounds in the mix. So yeah, and Jason, of course, too, right? So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.